Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy. I'm your host, Paula Jenkins. I invite you to join me as we explore how inspiring people have chosen joy in their lives and what they have to share with us about how to jumpstart joy in the world. Plus, how do we follow our own hearts, find work that lights us up while mindfully noticing the role that joy plays in our own journey. Hello and welcome to episode 67. This is Paula Jenkins, a life and career coach and the host of Jumpstart Your Joy. I want to wish you all a very happy new year. This is the first episode of 2017. One thing that you'll notice as we go into the new year with this show is each month I will be exploring a word or a topic in a more deep way than I've done in the past. So the word for January of 2017 is new, since it's a new year. And I know there's a lot of anticipation and angst maybe around what 2017 will bring. I know many of us were very glad to see 2016 come to a close. And I would just want to honor everything that we've been through and everything that is coming, and say thank you for being a part of this journey with me. And I hope that this show will bring some joy to you. This week is a solo cast about finding joy in uncertain times. In the midst of a shifting world, I have felt fairly weighed down recently. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about how it takes real courage to follow a muse like joy in hard times, and how following love and following joy in our own hearts is more important now than ever before. I've spent a long time thinking over some of the events of the world recently, and there was a little brief pause there for a couple weeks at the end of last year where I just decided to take a break and see what happened. I've found that joy has felt somewhat awkward for me recently, but yet it still is beckoning me on. And at the same time, when you turn your attention to any topic such as joy, which I have for the last 67 shows now, your eyes become open to something in a new way. And in my mulling and my exploring and my pondering of joy over the last month or so and what it means in this maybe new and uncertain time, I found a lot of uplifting quotes and thoughts from others that I wanted to share with you as we kind of go into this solo cast about joy in an uncertain time. So I'll get into that in just a little bit. Before we get there, I want to say welcome and thank you for listening. If you want to subscribe to the show, Jumpstart Your Joy is on all of the major podcasting syndication spots. Of course, iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Player FM. If you want to search for Jumpstart Your Joy, you can subscribe, and then you'll get each weekly episode delivered right to your mobile device, which is super handy if you are on the go. So please leave a review if you're going to subscribe as well. If you want to follow along, and there are some really great quotes from other people, so just pop on over to the website at jumpstartyourjoy.com/episode 67, and the links will be there and waiting for you. Some exciting announcements. In episode 66, I gave a call out to 2 of the graduates of my Jumpstart Your Podcast class, and there's 2 more. I'm so excited. It's so much fun to see these great podcasters coming out with their first episode. So first is Julie Neal, and she is the host of the podcast Mother's Quest, a show where she shares about the magic and mess of motherhood and invites guests to join her in an interview format. It's wonderful. She's had several amazing guests, and you can find her podcast at mothersquest.com. Congratulations, Julie, for launching your show. And another dear friend, Christine Petty, literally just launched her show, which is called Free Her Spirit, which is also the name of her website. And it's all about women's spirituality. It's where feminism meets the divine and mystical meets the mundane. I love her show, and I encourage you to check it out at freeherspirit.com. And I know you're really just going to love both those shows. There's a lot of heart in both of them. Congratulations, Christine. If you're curious about starting your show, you can come on over and join my very free podcasting fundamentals class on my website, jumpstartyourjoy.com, and it'll give you a great idea of the basics of what it takes to create a podcast. And you'll get on the VIP list to hear about when I open the next class of Jumpstart Your Podcast, which is the name of that class, in this year. So let's get on to the official episode. Over the past couple of months, I've been weighed down It's kind of this feeling of ick. I know a lot of us are feeling it. And there's definitely been this air of uncertainty over 2016, both in, I don't know, political, and I want to be careful here because I don't consider my podcast at all to be a political show. If anything here, I'm talking about kind of what happens to us in kind of a mental health space as a result of world events and political events. So there's some of that. And I don't really mean to take a political stance, but of course that's nearly impossible not to. In this political landscape, I'll put it out there and say that I feel like the shift that has come about with Trump has been somewhat unsettling. So at first, when these things started to become apparent and I started to feel the ickiness of it all, I was torn by the importance of feeling joy. Like, was joy still relevant in this world when it seemed like there were much more, and I'll use air quotes around, important things to worry about? Are rights going to be reversed? Are people going to be put on a registry? Like, these things seemed weighty and more deserving of my attention than the idea of joy. And it really did lead me to question, is following joy still a relevant cause? Did following joy have a purpose? And when there were so many other things that felt very real and deserving my attention. There were specific causes and specific events to attend and very real things to do that made me wrestle with the place that joy played in my life. Now, if you're a longtime listener, you know that I often talk about following joy, even when it's the hardest choice to make, and how following joy is not a naive choice. I think this is one of the things that comes up in having joy as a topic for a show or as, a platform for anything, is that oftentimes people misunderstand Jumpstart Your Joy is not simply about the very easy, naive angle of joy. It's not about the Pollyanna choices of just being happy and upbeat all the time. It's acknowledging that joy is a choice. And my favorite quote on this topic is from Henry Nouwen, and it is, "Joy does not simply happen to us. We must choose joy and keep choosing it every day." I love that quote so much because it really is like a touchstone for me. Every day I realize that I have the choice. Every moment, in fact, I have the choice to choose joy. I can choose love or I can choose fear. And I feel that love and joy are very synonymous with each other. The very story behind this podcast is that I chose joy after the traumatic birth of my son. I dug really deep and decided that there was something more going on for me, something more important, something bigger than me that I had to cling to get through what was arguably the hardest and scariest time of my life. These last couple months and maybe this entire, year-ish time have felt rocky and tenuous and in different ways, obviously, than a traumatic birth. It has felt like the things that I thought I knew were suddenly being called into question. Truths were no longer true. Equality, love, acceptance, hospitality, connection, all of these things that I would identify as core values, all of it was feeling tenuous. And I was starting to feel, like many of us have, I was starting to feel hopeless. Michelle Obama, of course, tapped into that feeling. And I think she said it so very nicely in her talk with Oprah. We feel the difference now. See, now we are feeling what not having hope feels like. Hope is necessary. It's a necessary concept. And Barack didn't just talk about hope because he thought it was a nice slogan to get votes. He and I and so many believe that what else do you have if you don't have hope? What do you give your kids if you can't give them hope? End quote. And so how do we dig in and find hope when it feels too hard? A similar question, because I feel like joy and hope are so closely knit together, is how do we find joy when it feels too far away or it feels too hard? As with any muse, and I would say that joy has invited me in and it's kind of my muse, it's fickle. It's easy and fun, and sometimes it's really simple. And other times it throws us a curveball and it's elusive. It hides from us, and it seems almost cruel in its teasing. This season has felt that way, like joy is hiding and like it's elusive and like it's teasing me a little bit. Joy is there somewhere, but she's hard to find. And just as with any muse, after mulling over the question of, should I continue to follow this thing when it seems so improbable right now? That this thing now seems simple and naive and possibly out of touch. Should I continue to follow it? And the answer is, and always is, yes. You should follow it. You should pursue it. Yes, now more than ever, when joy is hard to find and seems like she's an arm's length away, right now is precisely the time to keep following joy. Because it's like any relationship. This dance that I have with joy, it takes work. Finding joy, again, takes time, takes commitment, takes love. It takes courage and recognizing that joy is worth it. The contentment and happiness for yourself and for the others in the world, joy is worth it. So, as I came to this conclusion of saying, yes, right now is the right time to follow this muse. It's time to see it in a new light. It's time to keep choosing joy and choosing it every day. I started reflecting on several ways to find joy in uncertain times. And so I'd love to share these top 6 with you. And I want to give a big thanks, even up ahead, to the other people that have played a part in bringing these ideas to life. The first one is ask yourself what is true for you. While this list will be helpful for anyone who is struggling to find joy in an uncertain time, I'm going to go back to the Trump election as an example. Please note that you could totally change out this example for other things that have shaken your world or caused you to question or lose sight of joy. This one just seems like an easy one for me at this time. Something hit me several weeks ago when I think it was both Kellyanne Conway and Scotty Neal stated that there was no longer any such thing as a fact. Scotty Neal Hughes was recently quoted as saying on the Diane Rehm show on NPR that, quote, "One thing that's been interesting this entire campaign season is that people are saying that facts are facts. They're not really facts. It's kind of like looking at ratings or looking at a glass half full of water. Everyone has a way of interpreting them to be the truth or not true. And there's no such thing, unfortunately, anymore as facts." End quote. And I'll link to the whole interview, including the response by James Fallow of The Atlantic, which of course provides a rather thorough rebuttal, but I totally agree with, that there are provable facts in this world. Of course, at first I was outraged by this comment, but then I realized that this was actually putting everything very quickly into perspective for me. This statement was that the group around Trump was not basing their election or their way of moving through the world on the same, and I will say, as an aside, widely accepted playing field that many of us do. By taking facts out of the equation, they were interpreting the world really however they wanted. There's plenty to argue about here, and I'm going to leave that to another podcast host to take and run with, because that's not my show. But what clicked for me in knowing that there's a group of people out there that claims there's no such thing as a fact was that try as I wanted to make sense of what was going on, there was perhaps no sense to be made. Trying to comprehend the platform or the logic wasn't going to help me because this platform and this logic was not based in facts. And here's where the clarity hit. I could keep trying to make sense of the election, of what happened, of what Trump is doing on Twitter every day, but it was never going to make much sense to me. He and his team had confirmed that they were not working with facts, but they were working with their version of the truth. Ironically, there was freedom in accepting the reality of this situation. And the acceptance is that Trump won, and he's utterly unpredictable. Trying to fight the fact, or trying to change that fact that he won and he is, in fact, unpredictable, or trying to bargain my way out of the reality of that situation would only leave me, or you, stuck with painful thoughts. And this is where the Byron Katie story comes in so strongly, and I'll link to the episode with Molly Larkin where we talk about Byron Katie, but really what helps out here is accepting what is. Accepting the truth. Accepting, in fact, the fact that this is our president-elect. And it leads me to these questions. If I accept what is, what can I identify as being true for me? Instead of getting stuck in my head over what ifs, what matters to me? If I ask myself, do the same things matter to me that mattered at the beginning of 2016? Yes, those same things matter. Do I still believe the same things as I did at the beginning of 2016? I believe the same things. I see some things with new eyes, and I've been, things have become clearer to me, but the core of what I believe in remains. If you look at whatever feels uncertain and whatever this period of time is that you cannot, or you're having a hard time finding joy, What can you see if you look at what is true for you? What is true for you in this moment? What remains timelessly true for you? And please note that I'm not suggesting that you should ignore something that is a true issue for you or something that is a true issue in the lives of others. I'm saying with the reality being what it is true for you here? For me, once I'd taken a look inward, I could see that nothing much was all that different. My truths: I love working with Joy. I love talking to clients. I love my son. I love my husband. I appreciate hard work. I actually love project management as well. I know equality matters. I know feminism matters. Black lives matter. Marriage equality matters. Loving people matters. And being kind matters. I can still care very deeply about all of this, no matter what else has changed in my outside world. I know that the inside is still true. Those things still matter, and no one can take those things from me. So what is true for you? In this first step, I would say write it down. Look deep into your own heart. Feel what you feel, and take notice. So that's number 1. What is true for you? Number 2, it's perfectly okay and natural to grieve and feel sadness at the same time you feel excitement or joy. Here's another thing that I realized in having sat with hard times, whether it be having been divorced 12 years ago, going through a traumatic birth, or even this past election cycle. Change of any size is an emotional roller coaster. Judging your own emotions or trying to force yourself into feeling only one thing is denying the fullness of your experience. If you start to deny the fullness of that experience, what often comes up is a bunch of shoulds. And you'll hear your inner critic making judging comments like, if you were really upset about whatever this thing is, you should do this. So recognizing that it is completely natural to have more than one emotion at the same time is a really lovely acknowledgement, and letting yourself feel the fullness of both is also acceptable. So that is number 2. Number 3, see joy as an act of defiance and self-care. When things feel uncertain, and especially if they are being made to feel uncertain by people in power or by people who are wanting to control others, it's often true that they are purposefully working with fear in a powerful and manipulative way. If we fear for our safety or our way of life, or we feel challenged at some of our values, and when we feel like what we know to be true is being called into question, then we often turn our attention to that thing, whatever that fear is. And that's what starts to get a good deal of our attention. It's very hard to turn your attention to anything else when fear has been brought into the equation. Fear and the spin it can take on your life can put anybody and all of us collectively into a place of complete overwhelm. So to walk away from joy at that time, and to let go of joy, to let go of our sense of purpose, and to give in to that fear, then allows that to be the new status quo. So making space to follow the things that bring you joy often means that you're also making space to follow the very important things in your life. Acting against the things that feel oppressive, for example, making beautiful art to share with others, creating something that inspires other people, bringing about something new from the other emotions you're feeling and working through. When you give joy space, it allows you to do the things that you're here on this earth to do. And that is very important work. Joy and love are exactly what fear is not expecting. Because when someone follows joy, when somebody puts radical love into the world, it's nearly impossible for fear to live in that same space. So I would say by following joy, you're being defiant. And I have to say that sounds kind of fun. Don't give those other folks that want you to buy into the fear the satisfaction of you doing that. Don't give yourself that out. Don't let it take all of your attention. And that's one way for it to feel somewhat defiant and somewhat also restorative in a way, because you're feeding into the thing that feels like your purpose. You're feeding into the thing that gives you energy and gives you a greater sense of connection and love and acceptance in this world. Number 4, see joy as a way of caring for others. So maybe if you're not quite there at that place in your life where it feels right to give in and be, or to put forth a defiant act of joy, or to take care of yourself in that way, but you're still looking for a way to find joy in an uncertain time. Maybe leaning in right now would look like focusing your joy on someone or something else. What can you do that would uplift someone else? Is that volunteering? Is it helping a neighbor? Is it making meals for someone? What can you do? Sometimes it's easier to feel selfless and do something that gives to others instead of focusing that joy back on yourself. So if that feels easier, one way to jumpstart your joy in this situation would be to do something that is an act of kindness, or an act of love, or an act of graciousness towards someone else. What can you do that uplifts someone else? What can you share? Where can you share something you're good at or inspired by with someone else? And I mean this in a really real and active, tangible way, not a share a story on Facebook way. There was a whole lot of serendipity involved with the pieces that came together for this episode. And as I was looking at number 4 of seeing joy as a way of taking care of others, and looking at it as an opportunity to put a greater good and a greater joy into the world, my friend Helen McLaughlin sent out an email where she reflected on taking care of each other as a way of leaning into greater joy during this time. And so she wrote in her email, which I will link to, she sends out this lovely weekly email about her observations of life, and they really are all just delightful. But here's what she says. The writer Steve Edwards tweeted last week, "Taking care of each other is also subversive. Subversive not because it's disruptive or inflammatory. Subversive because it's truly revolutionary, because it's the least expected and most radical modus operandi in a divided country, which, by the way, is looking more and more like a divided world. Taking care looks different for different people. You can trust yourself to make the right call, to know what's needed for whom and when. If you take care of her or him, and seeing that heals my heart in some way, your decision to take care had a much greater impact than you could have imagined. Your taking care restored my faith in goodness. What I'm learning is that every act of love is part of social change. You are improving society by improving life for even one person. Don't undersell your heart's best work." And I love what Helen is saying here, because it recognizes that oftentimes when you do something in an act of caring for another person, it really amplifies joy in an exponential way. It helps the person, it brings joy to yourself, and then it multiplies the good that's in the world, and often gives even bystanders that sense of joy and well-being, and inspires them to do something else. So if right now your heart isn't in a place where maybe leaning into your own joy or doing something for yourself feels like the best way or the easiest way to go, think of those things that you can do for someone else, take care of someone else, and spread the joy in that way. Number 5, little bits of joy brought to life make room for more joy in your life. Another really amazing act of serendipity is that my friend and former guest Laura Sims shared a great post on her site about finding joy, about finding your purpose in uncertain times, and dropped this bit of little awesomeness. The most courageous people have a history of doing courageous things. That's because courage is not something you sit around hoping will show up. Courage is something you create. And of course, my heart leapt when I read this on the page. It also came around just about the same time that I was creating this episode as well. And the thing that really rang true for me here was that when you look at courage, I think courage and joy are closely interwoven. I mean, they both come from a place of love often, and a place of really knowing yourself, and a place of wanting to do the right thing, even if it's the hardest thing to do. And so in my mind, I kind of swapped out the words of courage and joy, and it sounds a little bit something like this. The most joyful people have a history of doing joyful things. That's because joy is not something you sit around hoping will show up. Joy is something that you create. And so in this idea, I mean, it goes and ties back so closely with that Henry Nouwen quote that I love as well, but that there's this sense that when you start to take that, even that first tiny step of creating a bit of joy in the world, or of following joy and what it looks like in your life, just that little bitty step, it sets up the space for more joy. Not only does joy feed itself, but once you've flexed that muscle and started leaning into joy, and you've taken a step to get out of the space of fear or just that general meh that comes up, you've put joy in motion. The first step might feel hard, and the step after that, the second step, will feel a little bit less so, and soon you're following joy and seeing where it leads you, and it's lost that overwhelming feeling. The other thing that I love about this is that for the first part, it's that joy feels easier once you've started making it a practice in your life. So if it's, going out of your way to do one joyful thing each day, that's a great way to start. But it's also that knowing that it's not something that just comes to find you. It's not something, joy isn't just something that shows up and says, here I am, to really find your way to it. It's something that you have to help co-create, and something that you have to recognize in yourself or in someone else. And so digging that out and making it a part of your life is one of the keys to finding joy in uncertain times. Number 6, explore what joy looks like at the crossroads of whatever else you're feeling. This one is so close to the idea that I think number 2, where it's that, it's possible to feel more than one thing at a time. But let me parse this out for us. So often we think that we can only hold room for one emotion at a time. But this idea is really what happens if you allow space for joy in this uncertain time to look like something new. So if you look at the crossroads of, I want to have more joy in my life, but I'm feeling this overwhelming amount of ick, well, what do those two things look like? Because I'll say that what joy looks like today for me is something very different than it may have looked like in previous times. The last year has led to a much deeper question for me about what joy is and what it looks like and where it shows up. The question that stays with me is one that I think I'll spend a lot of time with over the next year. And it's around what happens when my joy, or any one person's joy, comes at the expense or the cost of another person or group's joy. There's a lot to this question. It questions how economies even prosper. If economies are based on cheap labor from another country, how is my joy in purchasing this item in my country at the expense of whoever made it in another country? What happens when I drive my car and I use fossil fuel? What does that do to the larger ecosystem of joy? How does privilege and where I come from and where and when I was born, how does that come into my joy? And what am I taking for granted in my daily life that helps support the joy that I feel here and now, but that other people don't have? There's a whole lot in this that is deep and probing for me, and I think will really inform where I go in following the muse of joy through the next year. How do I further the joy of others along with my own is another piece of this question. How do I take the hopelessness that I've felt in this last few months and channel it into something else that helps others in a meaningful way? For me, joy is an invitation to go deeper, to look harder, and to spend time with uncomfortable questions. In my own world, if we go back to the example of the Trump campaign and election, I'm outraged by what some of I feel his election means. And so I'm going to go to the march in San Francisco on January 21st because it's a coming together of people who have similar values. The organizers of the march are saying it's a chance to come together for something we all stand for instead of something we stand against. That we show that we are stronger together and that we can do more together in a unified way. And it's a safe space to explore what that means. And so that's one of the things that I'm doing. And I think it's so important when we start looking at little bits of joy and what they look like at the crossroads of this new thing and exploring how joy can have a place even in the midst of an uncertain time. I think it's important to look at those things that you stand for. What do you stand for? What do you value? And then what's the action that you can take that would look like joy in this moment? My brand new boss took this idea in her annual holiday cookie making. She takes off several days each year to make cookies for her entire team. It was really, really beautiful to be the recipient of these cookies, and also just amazing to see the love and dedication that she puts into this each year. This year she leaned into the darkness that she had felt, and I was super inspired by what she said happened next. So let me read this to you from her blog. And this is from Jennifer Ching. This year's theme is darkness. It's about taking something dark and bleak and turning it into something beautiful. I tried to keep most of the color out of my boxes. I went with black icing, metallic, and of course, glitter. And the result is something new and never seen before. There is a luxe beauty in my boxes this year, and they epitomize the feelings I've felt, articulated in a pretty way through edible, sugary goodness. And you know what? It's helped. For the past week, I've done nothing but channel my energy into creating and making something beautiful that the people I love can enjoy. That black tar emotion and gunk in my trunk is actually kind of like rocket fuel, and I just let it all burn off. In doing that, it's taken my focus completely away from the crap that I've been going through and feeling, and now, after the project has ended, I feel like myself again. It was almost like an exorcism or a purge, and I am whole again. This has been a healing experience, literally." End quote. So if you take this idea that you can look for joy at the crossroads of whatever the new emotion is, whatever this uncertainty is, and give joy the room and the expanse and the space for it to become something new. It doesn't have to be what it had been before. It doesn't have to look exactly as it has before. What is out there? What is something that you have loved that you can dive back into and just give it the space to be whatever it will be now? It's possible that you will feel a new and different kind of joy when you let it be, when you live into it, and when you acknowledge the hardness of things. So I hope these 6 have really given you a basis for looking at joy in uncertain times. Here they are again, just real quick. Number 1, ask yourself what's true for you. Number 2, acknowledge that it's perfectly okay and natural to grieve or feel sadness at the same time as you feel excitement or joy. Number 3, see joy as an act of defiance and self-care. Number 4, see joy as a way of caring for others. Number 5, little bits of joy brought to life can make room for more joy in your life. And number 6, exploring what joy looks like at the crossroads of whatever else you're feeling. I want to give you guys a big thank you for tuning in and a happy new year for 2017. I wish you guys all the joy, all the excitement of exploring what joy looks like for you in this new season, in this new year. If you want to get links or check out some of those quotes, I'll have the links to Helen McLaughlin's email newsletter and Laura Sims' blog and over to Jennifer Ching's blog, so you can check out some of these inspiring words from other people. And you can find all of that at jumpstartyourjoy.com/episode 67. If you are hooked on podcasts, I'm going to invite you to sign up while you're there for my
podcasting fundamentals class. It's free. It gives you my insights on why podcasting is a great fit for your business or blog. You can get there from the drop down on the nav at the top. It's an interesting way to see if that might be a great fit for you and to explore something that might bring you joy. For next week on the podcast, I have fellow coach and podcaster Jo Casey joining me for episode 68. We share about her journey into getting into coaching and a lot about mindfulness, which is kind of the angle for newness for January in 2017. So I hope you will come on back for that. And until then, I hope that your days are filled with so much joy.